All right, so my upbringing was mostly secular for the most part. We didn't really have religion. I remember vaguely something about a vacation Bible school when I was a little kid, but I can't say that it had much impact on me. I think the number one thing that I remembered from being a kid was that there was Noah's Ark and John the Baptist. I heard about John the Baptist. I never really knew who Jesus was. So there was that. And fast forward quite a bit. By about the time we moved to Kentucky, I was starting to go in the wrong direction. The last about 6-7 years of my time spent in Indiana, I was heavily involved in martial arts. And we did that 3 times a week, and that was most of what I did outside of school. And right before I took my black belt test, and it's really a Navy blue belt in an art called Tong Sudo, we moved. And looking back, I can see that was the Lord. He was keeping me from some strange ceremonies with candles and probably spirits and all kinds of other things that I would have had no idea what was going on back then. Probably easily would have went into it. So we left there, and I very quickly got into drugs at this point, which I introduced that because that was my whole life for the next 10 years or more. It was all drugs, everything I did. My whole life was centered around that, and I pretty much at that time adopted this philosophy that nothing matters because we're all just gonna die anyways. So why should anything matter at that point? Nothing. It's a blink of an eye and you're gone. So eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, right? And I lived with that. So from the time I started getting into drugs, which I was about 12, 13, up until I was 15, I had already been on everything under the sun, and I was addicted to heroin. And I'm not going to talk too much about that, but just know it was part of my life from then forward. And I was selling drugs. I was starting to sell drugs even right around that time. So throughout high school, here I am, learning about evolution, and of course my dad always talked about conspiracy theories and Bat Boy, if anybody's ever heard of Bat Boy. Of course, aliens and all this stuff. So I never had a clear idea. I accepted what they taught me in school, that we evolved, and that made sense to me. It was logical the way it's presented, and they seem to have evidence the way they show it. So I just went with it. I never questioned it. And about the time I'm getting out of high school, I'm just wholly sold into all this and thinking maybe there's aliens out there, whatever. And I was deep into selling drugs. And so when I was getting out of school, I was working a job, and my parents were working. And right before I got out of high school and went to start working full time, my entire family got laid off at the exact same time from this company. And so we were hit very hard. And immediately I felt like a bird being there. So I left almost immediately. And I started living from place to place, from house to house, living with friends. We had a friend who we all kind of lived together and sold out of her place. And that was pretty consistent. But after about a year and a half of doing that, and you can imagine the heat that we attracted. The cops were just looking for us, and I was in trouble. I had unpaid fines and things, warrants that were starting to come out. So so did, my partner in crime. So it was kind of like, it's time for us to go. We got to get out of here. And we determined that we were going to leave the state. So we got a van, about $500, and our little family together, and we left. Started hitchhiking across, well, not hitchhiking, but we started, we call it spanging, but we started begging for gas across the country and made our way to Colorado to go see a friend that we had out there. And we stayed in Colorado together for quite some time, mostly just begging for everything and getting kickdowns. And I just ended up separating from my friends after a short while and going my own way. And that was the beginning of my time spent just being a vagabond. At this point, I've hitchhiked, train hopped, caught rides, I've begged my way across the country in vehicles and you name it. And I've been all over, all the way up the coast, the west coast, all the way back out to the east coast, all over the place. And, throughout those years, I started to wake up to, just what was going on in the world. I had heard a lot about the corruption and things that are out there, and especially high up, if you're reading into any kind of conspiracy theories. And with 9/11 happening when I was in the 5th grade, I had a lot of questions about the integrity of our government and the world at large. But seeing it firsthand and seeing how corrupt and how wicked the cities are, it's the last place I wanted to be, was in any of these major cities, and I've been to so many of them. So I spent a lot of my time being a vagabond in nature, and I did that from the time I was 19 until right about I was 23. And I really enjoyed the time I spent in nature. I started picking up on a lot of things and going back and forth from nature to the city, nature to the city. I look back and I credit a lot of my conversion to the time that I did spend in nature. Nature is God's first book that He wrote. And then He gave us the written word because we were too dull to comprehend the spiritual lessons that are all around us and everything He created. But the other thing is, I got this impression, this feeling that something was providing for me. I call it the universe, because everything I needed was always there. Whether it was food, whether it was clothing, whether it was sleeping gear, you name it. Everything I needed, I had it. And it was exactly when I needed it, it would be there. Matter of fact, people, if I needed to see someone or, for whatever reason, the timing was always perfect. I could be in another city across the country, thousands of miles away from where I met the person, and I run into them exactly when I need to. And it's like, hey, I was just thinking. I was just thinking that I needed to see you, and here you are. So it was apparent to me that coincidences are non-existent. There's no such thing. One of the habits that I developed that started to show me this was in the mornings, I would always wake up before everyone else. I didn't know why, but I would wake up and everybody else would be sleeping, and so you have a little bit of time to kill and you don't want to wake everybody up. So I would lay there and meditate, or even when I was by myself, which was the majority of the time, I would lay there and meditate because you don't necessarily want to get up right away. And I would think about past, present, future events in my life, and I would go over things, and it's almost like having a discussion. And I would get ideas about these things. And so, just to illustrate, one morning I remember laying under a bridge in California. I was by myself, and I woke up and I was meditating and pondering, and I got the strongest impression. I mean, it was like forceful, not voice or anything, but it's like, you gotta get up, go to the Safeway about 3 miles from here. So I'm like, okay, I go about my thing. I pack up all my stuff in my backpack and wander on down to the Safeway, and I sit down in front of the store, and about 10 minutes later, the manager walks out and hands me $40 and says that she felt impressed that I needed it. And it's kind of like, wow, that one of those things where coincidences aren't really coincidences. So I felt like there was this great force, or this whatever. The universe just seemed to provide. There was always everything, everything we need will be provided for us. So I started to preach these things to kids about how, if you just think about the things that you need, kind of present them, the universe provides them for you. It's just strange. If you need something, ask for it. You'll get it. And give, and it shall be given unto you. That's another one that was very strong in my experience. All the things that I had, I got this feeling through my experience that they weren't my own. It seemed to me very clearly that I was a steward of things that belonged to someone else, and that the things which I had, they weren't for me. I would oftentimes, I come across someone who needed just the very things I had, and so rather than keep it for myself and be stingy, I'd give it away. And the more I did this, the more I noticed that I had more than I could carry. Every time I gave something away, it's like 2-3 things would come to me, and people would give me things. And so I would keep, trying to get rid of it because I couldn't carry it all. And people would continue bringing me things, and so I got into trading and all of this. And I remember very vividly one time in Boulder, Colorado, the first time I spent some time there by myself. It was the only thing I did, my business that I went about was collecting things and then finding people that needed them. And silly things that you wouldn't think, who am I going to find somebody that needs this? Skateboard tape, baby clothes, boots, who would have think? You just find those people walking down the street. Here's a lady pushing her child in a stroller, a homeless lady, and the wind is blowing and it's cold, and this kid's needs a hat, and I just happen to have a baby hat in my backpack, and I was looking for somebody who needed it. Skateboard tape. Kid pulls up next to me on a skateboard, and his tape is almost completely gone off of his deck, and it's like, hey man, you need some skateboard tape? All right, yeah, you got anything to trade for it? No? Well, here you go, just take it. And so I started preaching to other kids about given it shall be given unto you, right? And fast forward a bunch more. I've had so many experiences, time would not permit to tell you. But, after some time of living this kind of lifestyle, you get lonely. People come, people go. You're meeting a lot of different people, but you want that one person with you who's stable, someone loyal. You get tired of being stabbed in the back and left and just abandoned and all of these things, and you want, a woman. And I desire to have a companion. And so I went diligently seeking one, and I found the girl. Matter of fact, I tracked her down and went and kind of halfway kidnapped her out in Southern California. Just to clarify, I did not actually kidnap her. But long story short, we hit it off, we got close, and we were together constantly, traveling. I can't tell you all those stories. But we were up in the northwest corner, I think all the way up in in the well, not the mountains, but in the national forest up there in Oregon. And she received communications from her mom. Her mom was going to be getting married, right? And she wanted to be there when her mom got married. Now, her mom was all the way out in Iowa. And so we had to, hightail it to Iowa. And for me, that was no problem because I was used to, bouncing around the country. I knew I could get there in no time. And, I believed firmly that the universe would provide for me. I had no doubt whatsoever. So it's like, well, let's go. You need to be there. We'll be there. As a matter of fact, I bet you it only takes us 3 days, because it just happens like that. And, that's how amazing God provides. That I had confidence I could get from one side of the country to the other in less than 3 days with nothing, absolutely nothing. And it really works like that, and it worked like that this time. But she showed her true colors because she just couldn't stand being on the road like I was. It was all a sham, really. She was kind of a faker. And so we left, and we hitched a ride down to Sacramento area, and then we hitched a ride out of there, and we ended up at this stop where there had just been some murders involving some hitchhikers, and so nobody was going to pick us up there. And people were happy to tell us that, but they wouldn't give us a ride. So we noticed that day that there was trains that they would consistently come throughout the day and stop, and then they would go. It's called a siding. That's where trains can pass each other. They have to stop and everything. So I got the idea, I'm going to go check out the map inside the gas station and talk to the people, see if they know anything about this train, where it's going, where these tracks head. And sure enough, on the map, you can see this is a main track. It runs along the 80, goes all the way across the country. So I'm like, okay, that's no problem. And these trains that come across, they're coming out of Roseville, and they have specified time intervals, and the employees actually knew when they left. So I knew that we had an 8-hour shot before that train was going to stop and be checked. Again, well, close to 8 hours. It's a few hours from Roseville, so it cuts off some of your time. But anyways, geared up. We had gotten some hand-downs, some kick-downs from people. And I got water, got some food, because we were going to hop this train through the desert, and we didn't. And went to her mom's, and, when we got off the train, we were on the other side of the state, and then a guy picked us up, and he took us in his truck the rest of the way, so we did get there in about 3 days, from Oregon to Iowa, no problem. And once we got there, I knew I couldn't stand this girl. But we weren't even there a month, and I learned that she was pregnant. And so that was one of the things that really knocked me sideways and made me really think. She was driving me crazy, but here I have this kid coming into the world, and I would give everything to take care of this kid. I didn't care what it took. So I went off by myself and was thinking about what I was going to do. But I realized, this kid needed not to be raised in the city and in these government schools that are indoctrinating people. This kid needs to be raised in nature. That's where we're supposed to be. But how am I going to do that? I didn't know how to live a successful life in nature. I didn't know how to sustain agriculture, take care of myself. And these are all the ideals that are coming to me that, I didn't know what I was going to do. And to top it all off, I couldn't stand this girl. So I purposed in my heart exactly what I was going to do. I knew I had connections. Been selling drugs for a long time, and at this point manufacturing and transporting and smuggling, the works. And I was like, okay, I need money first off. She wants to live in California where she's from, okay, so I'm going to go and just make a bunch of money really fast, and the best place to do that is in my hometown. Not to mention I need to square up with the government in many states now. I was in trouble and I owed a lot of money and I needed my license back and all these things. So that's what I needed to do. And I did it. I told her, this is what's gonna happen. I'm gonna go to Ohio. Give me a month, give me 2 months. That's tops, 4 months, max. And we'll have all the money we need to get started somewhere. Just give me that little bit of time. I'll go ahead. I'll send for you, and you can follow me. And she said okay. So I left. I got a bus, went to Ohio, and I started, doing my thing. And within a month, I had stacks of cash. I was working a job, and I had, plenty of product to make money with. And I sent for her. I said, come on. And she said not yet. She wanted to make a trip with her, was it her cousin? I think it was her cousin. Down to Georgia, she said. And so I was like, okay, and they wanted to take a month or whatever. And a month rolls around, and I messaged her. I was anxious to have her back. I missed her, even though I couldn't stand her. And so I sent for her, and she just started crying. We were talking on Skype, and she said, the baby's gone. It was a miscarriage, and this and that. And I knew better right then. I knew better. And I learned later the details, which I already knew, that she terminated that child, and it destroyed me. It broke me. I can talk about it now without tearing up so much, but at the time, the next day after she told me that, I woke up in cold sweat, just panicked. My heart was racing so bad, and that just kept happening. I was suffering anxiety so bad. I went to the doctor. They put me on anxiety medication like that. All I had to do was ask for it. And I had all this money, all these drugs. I was working a job. I just had everything I needed. I started drinking, and quite frankly, that was a bad decision because I got messed up liver, and I wasn't really thinking about it at the time. But I took the money I had. I went and bought beer and acid, and I grabbed a friend, and we didn't part for 2 years. And I drank steady for 2 years, non-stop. And I was such a bad alcoholic that I would wake up and drink first thing in the morning. What I would do is crack a beer, open it, and drink it. And so we got a vehicle. I was only in my hometown about a month after that. We got a vehicle. Well, I bought a van, and we left, and we were living out of my van, just drinking all the way across the country. Next thing you know, I'm listening, and I hear in the other room from the TV, which I no longer watched, these people on Ancient Aliens talking about a worldwide flood. And I had heard about this thing before, and I was wondering, all this evidence, this makes sense. A lot of these guys they're kooky about everything, but this makes sense, and I wondered if there was anything to it. And so I grabbed the laptop and I started to research. And immediately, the Lord was just opening my eyes to everything. I found flood geology, and all this evidence that shows that this world really was completely underwater not that long ago. Just thousands of years ago. And all the questions just started coming. If this whole world was underwater, there's no way we evolved. It's absolutely impossible. So how's everything still here? And I started looking into evolution and re-examining, all the evidence that I've been shown, everything I've been taught, and none of it added up. None of it made any sense. I just accepted it. I just bit the hook. And what did make sense was the fact that we were created, and I didn't know if maybe it was aliens that seeded this world or what, but I knew three things. Number one, the whole world was underwater. Number two, we were created. And number three, the Bible talked about those two things, but I had never read the Bible. And one of those impressions, again, I had to read the Bible. And so that's what I did. I got my hands on a Bible and I started reading it. And man, I tell you what, all those things, so many of the things I had learned by experience, many of the things which I taught and preached to other kids, myself, that I thought I came up with, and things that I learned, they were written down in these pages exactly what I had already known. And I knew that these words came from the same Spirit that had been teaching me for so long now and taking care of me. And I knew that it was a person, who loved me, who had been providing for me, and who had been teaching me, and just who had been with me all this time. And I broke down, realizing that God existed, that He was real, and that He created everything. He had that kind of power. And then thinking about the situation I was in, as depressed as I was, as suicidal as I was, as strung out as I was, I broke down and I said, hey, you're God. You're big. You created everything, and I'm just a little person, and you have to help me. You gotta help me. And that was my only prayer for some time, was just help me every day. I'm reading the Bible. I wake up, crack a beer, roll a joint, read the Bible, and every day it was just help me. And He did. I woke up one day and went to do my usual thing. I crack a beer and open the Bible, and I started to take a sip, and I didn't want it. It was disgusting, and I was used to drinking this all day, every day. I'm like, wait a minute, this is confusing. What is going on? And I tried to force this down my throat so I wouldn't get sick. I didn't want to shake and all that stuff. I didn't want to feel bad, and I couldn't. I hated it. All of a sudden, I hated beer, which I had been drinking steady all day long for 2 years straight. and it's like, wait a minute, what is going on? So as confused as I was, I took a shower, I poured the beer out, and I never drank another one ever since. And the same thing happened with, tobacco. The Lord looked at me, and he said, look at yourself. And I realized I was a slave to this thing, and I said I didn't want it. And I set it aside. And just by Him saying that one word to me, I had victory over that thing. And I never touched nicotine again. The heroin story is a little more intense after that, but suffice it to say that, the Lord brought me to my knees, and I said, Lord, my life is in your hands. And whatever you want to do with me, whether I live or die, it's up to you. I don't care at this point. The only thing I cared about was His Word and the truth. And so I read the whole Bible in a series of months, and I was a different person. And pretty soon, as you get towards the end of the book, there's plenty of exhortations not to forsake the assembling of yourselves together in various ways, and exactly those words. So I was convicted that I needed to go to church. I needed to find other people that believe this stuff. Here I am by myself thinking maybe I'm just going crazy. And so that's exactly what I did. I started looking for assemblies. I didn't really want to go to church. And so I was reasoning with God again. I said, look, this is the deal. Unless you can show me one of these churches that doesn't teach any error, I'm not going. I don't want to sit and listen to some false preacher or something. And, as I looked at all these churches, none of them taught what the Bible taught. It was all something different. You've got all this nonsense about people turning into ghosts and people going to church on Sundays. One of the biggest things that it's not in the Bible. And I knew these were the words of the living God, so this is what I was going to follow. And I looked and I was happy about it, because I'm finding all these churches are wrong. So about the time I prayed that prayer, I said, Lord, I'm not going to go to church unless you show me one that doesn't have any error. Probably wasn't a week. And, doing my thing, I was researching creation and sharing, which I love to share. And immediately I started sharing online and other ways, teaching people about creation and God. And I came across Walter White and his Genesis Conflict series, which, most of the information I was familiar with. A good portion of it, though, I wasn't, and it was great. I mean, he's one of the best presenters I've ever listened to, and so I was just absolutely astounded by his material and his presenting style. I loved it, and the question popped into my mind. It said, this guy's right about all this stuff. He has this nail in the head. I wonder what else that he talks about, aside from the creation thing, because that was really my focus. And so I started to look for his other videos, and I found his Total Onslaught series. And here, I started watching this thing, and everything that I learned from Scripture, it was all in one place with this guy. Creation was there. The Sabbath was there. Just what happens to man when he dies, it's there. Prophecy, it's there, and he's got it. Everything is correct, and it's all in one place, and I'm learning so many things that I didn't know before from the Scriptures. And by the time I'm getting close to the end of this series, I'm like, wow, everything he's presented is exactly what the Bible teaches. It's exactly from Scripture, exactly right. This is the truth. And I wonder, what church this guy goes to. And sure enough, the last video of the series, he closes the whole thing. He says, if you've been with me this far, and everything I've said is correct, then you're a Seventh-day Adventist, and we need to talk about baptism. And so I just remember being like, Seventh-day Adventist? What is a Seventh-day Adventist? I've never heard of a Seventh-day Adventist before. And I started looking into the Seventh-day Adventists, and sure enough, man, I could not gainsay anything with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The fundamentals, none of it. It was all accurate, 100%. And the Lord convicted me. I had to go to church. So that Sabbath, that very Sabbath, I borrowed my mother's car, and I drove to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And when I went to walk in the door, these poor people, I remember Sean, he opened the door and he looked at me, and his first statement to me was, "Where did you come from?" Something along those lines. And I just showed up and I started coming, and I haven't missed a Sabbath since. Yeah, I walked in and I started teaching them a lot of stuff from the Bible. And they put me in the pulpit rather quickly. And within a year, I was already handing out free literature. I went down, had a chance to work as a call porter. And I started call porter work soon after, and did that for about 2 years. And I could tell you so many stories in just that time period, but I won't. In closing, the Scripture says that it's Romans 5:8. It says, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. It's powerful when you think about it, because, while I was yet a junkie, an addict, all of these things, the Lord was merciful to me. He took care of me, provided everything I needed, and ultimately He gave His life for me. He looked at me when I was in that state, and He said, this guy, I'll die for him so that he doesn't have to, even though I wanted to die, really. And He thinks the same way about each and every one of us. That, He loves us to that extent. And He sees not what we are, but what we can be through Him. Through His transforming grace. He pours out His Holy Spirit on us, and we become new people, new creatures, new creations. And He completely transformed me through His Word. He says, my words, their spirit and their life. And they are. gave me of His life and resurrected me from being quite literally nearly dead. I was dead spiritually, but I was physically right there. And changed my diet, changed my habits, changed my character, changed my personality. And here I am still alive today because